All right, now we're moving on to the actual manuscripts families, or the family of manuscripts that whereby textual critics actually look at all of these and decide based on how many variants they are between one family, the next family, and so forth. So when we get to Old Testament manuscript families, they're roughly 4 or 5 families. I mean, one what we would think of the most important ones are the Masoretic text. Masoretic texts are, again, a group of Hebrew scholars working, again, in the church age, as we talk about it, roughly 800 AD. And this is important because they developed not only the preservation system, but these are the folks who developed the vowel pointing system. And these are the folks that, again, to just be able to, for Gentiles like us and even Jews who sort of lost the ability to understand the ancient words, without adding letters to the alphabet, they added vowel points that would go above, below, or in between the letters so that you could properly pronounce the words. And this was a great help in folks actually being able to pronounce it. And of course, vowel points aren't inspired, but they certainly help us in as far as reading the text. So the Masoretic texts are some of the most well-preserved, complete, important things for us. But again, just a note here, and I'm going to repeat this a couple of times, is that remember that even when you get to variants, we could throw out virtually all the variants and say, even though we have, really, really good ideas and high levels of certainty on what's the correct reading, we could throw out of the variants and not one essential doctrine of Christianity would be affected, because we could reproduce and argue for those on the texts that don't have variants, okay? So that's probably one of the most important takeaways for when we think about textual criticism and the Bible and the formation of doctrine. So we start with the Masoretic text, and again, they're a great source. But then we've got copies of the Septuagint. Again, Septuagint is a translation of the Hebrew Old Testament done into Greek about 250 years before Christ. And again, we have current copies of the Septuagint. So from the Septuagint, we can see what the basis was, or what the Hebrew manuscript basis was at that time when they translated the Septuagint. Now, one of the keys of the Septuagint, though, which arguably a majority of scholars agree on, is that in the last segment, I talked about Bible translations and, formal equivalence, dynamic equivalence, and what that means. That'll be in the next segment. But one argument is that the Septuagint has more dynamic equivalence, more like the NIV. So there's less of a word-for-word correspondence, as with more of a thought-for-thought correspondence, which is dynamic equivalent. Instead of trying to do word-for-word equivalence as much as possible, you've got thought-for-thought propositional equivalence. Okay, so that's why it's a little bit tougher to go from the Septuagint backwards into which Hebrew words are used. So, but that said, we still have manuscript witnesses as an early 250 BC translation of the scriptures. That, and again, other translation, the Sumerian Pentateuch, okay? Again, this differs from the Masoretic text in about 6,000 instances. So again, fact is that a lot of these, you got to remember, are spelling differences because of regional differences and so on and so forth. But there, we've got the Sumerian Pentateuch. And then, of course, we've got the famous story of the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, these ancient scrolls hidden in the cave. And that's just one of those great stories, archaeological stories. So from that, we've got all of these, complete scrolls, older than what we had before, great Isaiah scroll, so on and so forth. So in this case, there's so much we have to learn as Christian apologists, but, this is also a good reason to, besides all the learning that you can do, go study archaeology, go on a dig, go to some of the hot deserts in the ancient Near East where, the Essene community, and go ask the local shepherd people on where the caves are, where they're hiding all the stuff, okay? Maybe you can discover the next batch of manuscripts. So, all right, now that is, that, in effect, are the manuscripts that we have from which textual critics put together our critical version of the Old Testament, okay, the Hebrew Old Testament. And so And again, I'll offer you books and all sorts. We'll have discussions on this, on particular items, if you want, in our written discussions. But the fact is that we have a highly accurate, reliable Hebrew Old Testament. And again, we can argue about the percentage of variants and what they are. But the fact is that we have an accurate one. More details to come. Now, next we move to New Testament manuscript families. So now we're looking at the Greek New Testament. What are the families of manuscripts? And when we talk about families, remember, we're talking about ultimately regions where certain people, okay, this one was mainly in Rome, this one is in Caesarea, this was so on and so forth, where you find out that there's prominent churches there that started to make copies for that region. So a lot of these ultimately end up being regional differences in the readings and the manuscripts that get recopied. So I'm just going to go through the basis of these. And again, this is what New Testament textual critics are considering when they're thinking about manuscripts. Number one, what they call the Proto-Alexandrian text. And this, I'll just read through it here. It says, text family is also designated as the neutral text family. Family of texts is represented by some of the oldest New Testament texts, including Codex Sinaiticus, Codex Vaticanus, both dating back to the early 4th century. Okay. Now, these are early complete manuscripts of the Bible and the New Testament. And again, Codex Sinaiticus, and again, there's a great story behind that of, basically archaeologists finding a monastery, and it's like, yeah, we've got this old Bible here. It's like, can I buy it from you? So, yeah, 4th century complete copy of the Bible. Yeah, so that's been again a treasure for as far as New Testament studies. Again, and then we have older ones like what they call the Bodmer papyri, the Chester Beatty papyri, Papyrus 66, Papyrus number 75. They have numbers for these papyri that they do. Well, this is what they call the Proto-Alexandrian text. These are some of the most ancient copies that we actually have. And again, the region, Alexandria, they're Proto-Alexandrian. Next, we move to the Western text. Western texts used in the West, primarily in North Africa. Family of texts is represented by Codex Beza, aka Codex D, as well as the Old Latin Syriac translations and so forth. This text was used by Marcion, Irenaeus, Tertullian, Cyprian, but rejected by Westcott and Hort when they did their first critical edition back in the 19th century. So next, the Byzantine text family. Byzantine text family, adopted in Constantinople, used as the common text in the Byzantine world. A great majority of the late, what they call uppercase or uncial manuscripts are from this Byzantine text. This became the basis for Erasmus's Textus Receptus. Okay, so this Byzantine text is now Textus Receptus, and this was the basis for example, Martin Luther's original translation of the German Bible and the King James Bible. So again, we've got what Byzantine text that is the manuscript basis ultimately for Textus Receptus that becomes the manuscript basis for what we say is King James and the original German text. Now, next we get to the Alexandrian family proper. Alexandrian family is that, originates in Alexandria, Egypt. They're using these, arguably, the Proto-Alexandrian text. And so what we've got is, Codex Ephraemi, which some of the Codex Ephraemi Rescriptus, where they scrape something off and write something out over papyri. That's a Rescriptus papyri, and so on and so forth. So, again, so we have Coptic versions and Greek versions. This is part of the Alexandrian family of manuscripts. Caesarean texts, again, just real quick here, compilation of both Western and Alexandrian texts associated with Origen and Eusebius, and so on and so forth. So the point is you'll read a lot about this in our textbooks, but when you're thinking about, well, what really are the differences? Well, you have roughly 5 different families of texts that have rough variants from one another. And then what do? Well, in the next segment, what we're going to look at is that when we're confronted with variants from these different manuscript families, why are there variants? See, there's always a reason why there's a difference. Everything from mistake complete mistake to an intentional change in the text, by which and for which, of course, we can deduce, the reason for it. So anyway, we'll look at that in the next segment. But again, for now, those are the manuscript families for both the Old and New Testament. Thanks.